Good evening, happy Sunday, and welcome to the Layover. Tonight, Scott gets a little bit frosty, Mark has tunnel vision, and I take a moment to reflect. Welcome to the Layover.
One life for the revolution. Rise up and unite. Woo! Rise up.
What were you doing there? So we noticed halfway through Lindsay's little chat there that the microphone was the wrong way around.
And I didn't even have the right button ready to push the intro, so I'm feeling.
Yeah, I wondered why there was a bit of a gap. But never mind. At least we started on time. Hello, everyone.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, and hello to people in the future. So how's it going?
It's been a bit manic, as you know. I just sat down in this seat 5 minutes ago, but we're ready to go.
Well, I've been standing by all week for work.
Yeah.
Poised like a coiled spring, ready to go. But thankfully, everybody's turned up that should have turned up.
Yeah, but I did a little bit of flying, bit of big aeroplane flying, bit of little aeroplane flying. All good fun. Posted a video of the yak rumbling away when I was.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
Liters and liters of oil up in the engine.
I mean, how many does it use an hour?
I think you'd be hard pushed getting away with less than a liter of oil an hour-ish, maybe a bit less.
And go and scare me. How much fuel does it use?
If you're doing aeros, it's about a litre a minute, but it's about 45 litres an hour. About 45 litres an hour for just sort of regular flying around.
Goodness.
It's worth it.
We've had a heat wave down here this week, Scott, and for you and I being Scottish, it's been particularly noticeable.
You can particularly see that I've turned a normal colour rather than opaque is a normal colour.
What's this though about you feeling frosty?
Oh, good Lord. Well, yesterday I posted a video on Twitter of an A320 taking off with quite a considerable layer of snow on the wing, actually. Probably had about 4 or 5 inches of snow on the wing. And they'd obviously decided that actually we're just going to go with the snow on the wing. It'll be fine. And they go trundling down. It generated a huge discussion, actually. Some of it positive, some of it actually quite surprising that so many people thought, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with it. But bottom line is, and I said this in the tweet, if you ever see that as a crew member or a passenger, it's not right. Having that minute snow on your wing just before you take off is not right. You need to tell the crew, actually, there's something wrong here. You need to stop. It's really, really dangerous. Accumulated snow on the wing, ice below it. And people say, oh, but it's minus 40. There'll be no ice, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, no, that's not how it works. The wing is full of fuel, which is warm, which warms the wing, melts the snow forms into ice, and you end up with this very clear layer of ice above the wing. Snow comes off and you think, it's all gone. Brilliant. And then you get airborne and find that actually you got no lift because your wing's not the shape it should be.
And I mean, there's a lot of history and a lot of cases where things have ended badly for aircraft that have got airborne with snow and ice on the wing.
There we go.
What's this one?
Oh, good Lord. That looks local as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's why it's a British registered aeroplane. It's a BEA, I think, BEA DC-3. And I think, and I should have done my research more properly, but I think that was out of Northolt. That's obviously a nice little suburban house. But that was taking off. The aeroplane basically couldn't get airborne due to not properly airborne. And it parked it. So I think it hit the house across the road and then parked itself in that house. I think it was a freighter as well, and the crew descended and came through the roof and left out the front door. So there we go. But it's an extraordinary, very lucky escape. Apparently, the wings were heaped with snow, and they've been trying to clear them with brooms and brushes and things. But it's all a bit more advanced than that these days. Luckily,
not much.
We should do a special on snow and ice. Scott,
Maybe going into the winter.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
so
I was actually sorry. I was just going to say to everyone, I think we should do a special on snow and ice, and I hope to have it out before the end of next week if we can. Just because that video has brought up so many misunderstandings, particularly around de-icing. We have a button that presses for anti-ice. In fact, great picture. We have a button that people say, oh, you've got an anti-ice system. It is an anti-ice system, but it only anti-ices some of the wing or de-ices some of the wing. Yeah. So I think we need to really explain that to people. So we'll do a video this week, short video for you. Hopefully get it out sort of maybe towards the end of the week to explain exactly what we were trying to impart in that tweet and a huge misunderstanding.
Our colleagues at American there, and they're de-icing the fuselage, of course, which is also not allowed any heaped snow on it. It's the only place you can have a little tiny bit of frost, but we'll come to that another time. So there we go.
But actually quite good this time of year, getting into winter.
And it's an interesting area. It's one of those areas that everybody on the airport's got to be super coordinated, and maybe Michael, actually Kim as well, because she did a bit of ground ops. It is a complicated time de-icing airplanes.
And faffy as well, or potential to be faffy.
It's got everything going on. Anyway,
right, tell us about this tunnel vision.
Oh my goodness me. Okay, so there's a gentleman called Dario Costa. So, and this was a couple of weeks ago, so you've probably all seen it before, but he's now in the Guinness Book of Records for, by the way, I don't know if I've ever mentioned, but I'm in the Guinness Book of Records.
No, I am as well.
Scott, are you in the Guinness Book of Records?
Can you feature Scott?
No, I'm not, but I know why you're in the Guinness Book of Records, Mark. And I was actually there for when it happened. And in fact, we discussed this the other day, actually. Tony Hadley was involved, as was Kim Wilde.
Anyway, so this lunatic flew his Zivco, his Edge 540, through this tunnel. It's a huge tunnel. And apparently it's all modified. And Formula
One seat.
Yeah, it all looked a bit crazy. Wow. It's 43 seconds of pure hell, if you ask me. 2.25-ish kilometers, and it says 245 kilometers an hour. What's that? That's 140 odd knots, something like that. So yeah, that's pretty fast. It was pretty interesting because he started in the tunnel, and I thought, that's just an exercise in keeping straight and not climbing, right? And then he flew out of the tunnel and into another tunnel. And at that point, I thought, okay, that's it. I'm not interested anymon.
Yeah, don't know about bonkers.
Well, he actually got 5 world records out of this.
Did he?
Yeah.
Go
5
on,
for the price of 1.
Yeah. Amazing. But it's obviously in Turkey. Which so good on them. Amazing that they can shut a big chunk of road for that long enough. But
so I'm just looking at these records that he got. Yes. Surely, so he got obviously the longest tunnel flown through with an airplane.
Yeah.
But he also got the first airplane flight through a tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he could have done a 2-foot long tunnel and he'd have still got the record. Is that?
I think
I don't want to take the edge off it, Scott, but
surely somebody's gone through a tunnel before.
Yeah, I think I don't know, maybe not. I know that Steve Jones and what's the other fella's name?
Paul Bonham. They went through a hangar. I remember that.
They went through the hangar, and that was pretty cool. That I have to say, that did it more for me than this one did. This just looked.
Yeah, I flew with Paul after they'd done that, and he said it was the most frightening thing he'd ever done in his life.
Really?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he's done a lot of stupid things. So if that scared him, then that is probably something that we shouldn't be trying in our PA-28s or our Cubs, right? But the other one here that's a weird record that I think is it's the longest flight under a solid obstacle.
Yeah.
What a weird record.
And also the first airplane takeoff from a tunnel. That was I think record number 5.
So So can
How can that be how can that be a record? It's just a first. It's not a record, is it?
Well,
So how can anyone beat that?
Well, I don't know.
I'm just asking. But how can you beat being the first person to do something? Guinness World Records are all about we're going to beat it next time and make it bigger and better.
Scott,
quite right. You tell them. What I will say is my record, which is the highest gig. So I was the captain on the highest gig, which is 43,000 feet. And there was a little gentleman who turned up with a Guinness World Record jacket on and all sorts of things and a proper clipboard. It was, if you remember the time, it was very much like, Norris McWhirter and Roy Castle and record breakers and all that kind of stuff. It was quite amazing. They took it all extremely seriously. I was amazed. But there we go. Anyway.
Shall I just share what my record was for whilst we're in the sharing mood?
Yes.
So I was part of a 100-mile relay run, believe it or not, when I was an air cadet, and 2005 edition, Athletics 4 was the page.
Oh.
Can't remember the page number exactly off my heart, but
you can. You're just trying to play it down, but you actually can. Have
3,
you got
4, 5 or something?
Lynn told me, she said,
roughly.
Yeah.
I think it was after a run that we'd been on. She said, I'm in the Guinness Book of Records for running.
And I just cried the whole way around the run with Mark. So
anyway,
yeah, that had nothing to do with the running. That's just because you were running with him.
Probably.
We're going to be a little tiny bit somber.
So just before we bring in our guests this week, we couldn't go out without mentioning it's the 20th anniversary of September the 11th. So 2 decades on, people across the world this week have been remembering the events of September the 11th. There was 2,996 people lost their lives that day. Just, normal people going off to work, whether it be, working in the towers, airline crew, emergency services, not knowing what tragedies would then unfold that day. So there's been quite a lot of documentaries on TV this week. We've managed to see a few of them. And one bit that really kind of struck with me was that somebody said it was the very best and, the very worst of humanity that day. And that, the very worst for why the events happened. But actually with, all the rescue effort and everybody, afterwards and the massive push to get it, all the people out, that was the very best. And so, it's kind of shaped the last 2 decades of aviation safety and security. And, I guess if there's one positive to come out of it, it's that, we're operating in, what I think is a safer environment now.
Yeah. It's certainly extraordinary. I think we can all remember where we were.
Yeah, I mean, people can think back to, where they were at that time and what they were doing, and then, how it kind of, particularly within the aviation community, how it kind of shaped their career as well.
Anyway, there we go. I think worth remembering.
It was very sad listening to the ATC transcripts, and I know we're going to talk about ATC tonight, but some of the passenger calls from the flights, and it was really quite moving, particularly in some of the Netflix stuff. So
yeah.
Got
some nicer news.
Yeah, some nicer news. Do you remember last week, Scott, we talked about the Boeing Stearman, the wing walkers that ditched in Pearl Harbor?
Wasn't such a good day out, was it, for them?
Well, no, but it turned out it didn't end too badly. So the pilot put a tweet out to say 1 week ago, myself and his wing walker were discharged from Poole Hospital, and basically had a few cuts and bruises, but generally we're all okay. So it's quite nice to follow that up on.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
It is nice. And it's nice that it looks like they got back in the saddle there as well and went flying again, which is
lovely. Is lovely.
So, Link, what are we doing? What goes on tonight?
Proper superstars.
Oh, really?
So tonight, Scott, we are privileged to be joined by not one, but 2 skilled experts from very different areas of air traffic control. Now, air traffic control is an extraordinary machine which keeps our skies safe and all of the aircraft moving 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And even more extraordinary is the fact that this machine is very much dependent on the people, and that the most fundamental of human skills, which is speech. Controller by day and sparkly unicorn by night, Our first guest, Kim, started her aviation career in airfield operations at Heathrow. 9 years later, she's now an approach controller for Luton and Stansted, as well as an instructor, training and coaching the next generation of controllers. Our second guest, suspended in a box high above the airport, is Michael. We will hear about how a chance encounter at the UK's highest airport shaped his career path into controlling and what it takes to keep Heathrow running smoothly. Now, boasting 2 decades of experience between them, we're in for a really exciting insight into what it takes to keep our skies safe. And if we're really lucky, we might even find out what Michael's mythical spirit animal is too. So, Michael and Kim, welcome to the show. Good evening.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Michael's stayed characteristically Yorkshire deadpan through that.
I'm trying to work out my mythical animal. In fact, I'm just enjoying it. It's so nice to be able to see your faces rather than just hear voices for a change. I think it's pleasurable.
Hey, Michael, I'm thinking about the mythical animal thing as well. I'm thinking for me, it's probably hippo. And that's not very mythical, I know, but it's the only one I can think of. Starting tonight, we've been fortunate on this show to hear varied pathways our guests have had, taking them into aviation or any part of the aviation world. For some, it was the fulfillment of a childhood dream. You know, for example, me, I always wanted to be a pilot, never quite made it, but might make it soon. For others, it was a chance to, change a heart later in life. They switched careers and done from other stuff. Ladies first, this evening, Kim, how did you find yourself in this wild world of aviation, and what first sparked your interest?
I kind of fell into it. I wanted to do medicine originally, wanted to be a doctor. I applied for an RAF bursary back when I was in college. Didn't get it, but you have to pass all the aptitude tests anyway. I passed the aptitude test for everything, including air traffic control, and they said basically, have a look at it. I think you'd be really good at it. So I kind of parked it, thought, no, medicine, doctor, that's what I want to be. It was always ticking away in the back of my head. Went to uni, studied pharmacology, decided didn't want to be a doctor in the end, finished university, had a bit of a young life crisis, thought I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now. Got a job at Southampton Airport in security. And then that's kind of when the bug bit, just being around the aircraft, being around the flight crew. I met my now husband. He was in airfield ops at the time. And we'd go driving around the airfield and I'd listen to air traffic. And then I was there going, I remember I was told about this. This is quite interesting. And it kind of went from there. So I went from there to Heathrow ops at airfield ops at Heathrow. And yeah, NATS in 2012 I started.
Wow. Well, we'll come on to your NATS career a little bit later. But Mike, how did your journey to where you are now at the pinnacle of the tar, as they call it?
I was the quintessential childhood dream. Parents used to take me to the airport. There was a cafe there. I just watched the planes. I think it was just free childcare more than anything. And from that point, just watched, enjoyed it. It was at Leeds Bradford International Airport, so we were quite limited in the enjoyment of aircraft. It used to be a fair few hours between movements. So every so often we'd take a trip to Manchester. And it was at that point where you got the smells and the sounds of the big jets that really piqued that interest. I decided I wanted to fly. I got a PPL, managed to get a job at the flying school and was working there and was going through it all, done all my hours, CPL cross country. It's time to start the theory. Got the ATPLs, started general nav and decided, do I really want to be a pilot? At this time, it's kind of been interested in air traffic. It's kind of the dark art. It was interesting to see how it all happened. So I just had a word with one of the controllers there and he gracefully took me on a trip to the tower, spent the day with him. And at that point, I was just hooked as like, this is where I want to be. This is the enjoyment, the fast-paced action of it all. Love flying, but this is where I kind of get my kicks from it. And then at that point, applied to NATS and was fortunate to get in.
Wow.
It's all general NAV's fault.
I like the free childcare idea as well. Your parents just kind of leaving you in the cafe. Yeah. See you later, Michael. See you later.
The only thing that I took away from that, which is probably true, is that if you fail as a pilot, you become an air trafficker. Is that right?
That is below that. I'm going to red card you already. He did not say that. He said he chose not to be a pilot.
Oh, sorry, I missed that bit.
Technically, I was going to be
card.
a pilot and decided there was a better alternative to go to.
Oh, right. Okay, Michael. Yeah.
Touche.
And all I took away from that was that Kim and her now husband used to, was it like date night when you used to drive around the airfield?
Drive around the airport.
Yeah, I used to, we'd have to go and do foot patrols. And so I'd always volunteer to do the long foot patrol airside and text him as I was leaving, basically going, I'll be there in 20 minutes. There, he'd have a cup of tea waiting, and then he'd drive me back.
That is cute, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very sweet, very romantic airports, aren't they? So listen, right, you're both air traffickers, but completely different. And you've got a completely different office and a completely different view. I guess if we start with Michael, first of all, for people that don't necessarily know, describe the job. So what is a tower controller? What is it that you do? And then we'll move on to Kimmy.
So as a tower controller, I'm responsible for the airport itself and the very local area around it. So we control all the movements of the aircraft taxi around on the ground and the runways themselves. And then when aircraft are inbound, from about 10 miles out, they'll start speaking to us. Then after takeoff, till about 2,000-3,000 feet, and then we'll hand them off to our colleagues. So we're very localized, just doing the airport itself. But we are the ones, as you can see from that picture, in the quintessential view that people have of air traffic, the tall building in the middle of the airport. The big distinction of our job is that our primary way of doing our work is visually. So our controlling is by looking out of the window and seeing the problems and solutions.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess so. At that point, it's really good to then talk to Kim about what it is you do and what your environment looks like and how that interfaces with the tower.
I have no windows. So mine is all done by radar. It's all just a flat radar tube. And to put it, I guess the easiest way that I can think of is we take aircraft from other sectors that feed into us, and it can be anything from 20, 30, 50 miles away, sometimes even more. And we get them into a nice, neat, safe, orderly and expeditious line. We get them onto final approach for the runway, and then we hand them off to the tower controllers, and they deal with it from, like Mike said, anything from 10 miles down to 6 miles is probably the latest that we give it to the tower. And then they're the ones who sort out the clearance for landing. But we sort out everything so that it's all nicely, neatly presented for them.
And actually, I'm just going to put that back up. What are we looking at there? I can see some screens. I can see some little consoles. I can see somebody's drink by the looks of things. What are those screens? What do they all do?
So that's an AC from the looks of it display, but that's basically the radar, and the radar has all of the aircraft, their little asterisks to us with the data labels, which will have their call sign, their altitude, their speed, their rate of climb or descent. You can click a button to see what their projected track is and what the heading is, etc. They've also got a comms panel, so that's where we talk to all the different sectors around us, to the tower, to other sectors. I think area controllers can talk to, say, Paris and Maastricht, whereas in my sector, we're much more limited to just the London TMA. And then I've also got a long range planning tube as well with everything filtered out, so I'll only see the Stansted and Luton inbounds, because that's what I use to make my plan. We love a plan, we love forward planning, and I'm planning from 50 to 70 miles away sometimes. So yeah.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. And then I was just going to briefly go back to Michael's environment and just get him to just explain what we're looking at there, because I can see a thing that looks a bit like a map of the airfield, and then a thing with a circle on it, and then a massive list of stuff.
So the map of the airport is exactly as you say. It's a map of the airport, but superimposed on that is the aircraft. So that's our ground radar. So although we can look out the window in periods of low visibility or at night, or some areas of the airfield we may not be able to see, we can use the ground radar to be able to see where all the aircraft are. Just to the left of that, in the blue screen, is the air traffic monitor. So that shows us everything that's in the sky. So it's a really zoomed in version of Kim's radar. At the top section is the general area, and then you can see below there's 2 boxes. That's a look down the approach, so we can see how accurately you're flying the approach. To the left of that, the other blue screen has all the Met data, and that has information about the airfield that we may need quite quickly. Just below that, you can kind of see half the grey screen. That's our electronic flight strip display. So rather than having to remember everything, we have flight strips for every single aircraft, and we annotate information on that so we can keep track of what each aircraft's doing at any time. And then on the right, you can kind of see a black screen with lots of green lines. At Heathrow, we've got quite a special aerodrome ground lighting system. So at night, rather than all the taxiway lighting being on all the time, we can do selectable routes. So there'll only be one route at a junction for an aircraft to follow. So rather than having to give daytime taxi instructions, we can just say to the aircraft, follow the greens. In the runway holding area, that's done by the departure controller. So that's the screen they use. They just tap on that screen to be able to select the green routing. And the big screen on the right with a list of information is really boring. It's just all the aircraft that are inbound. So it's just if we need to have a quick look and see if there's any extra information we need.
And do you guys plan as much as Kim? Do you think, or is there a balance between?
We don't. You plan to an extent, but not that far in advance. We're probably planning no more than 10, 15 minutes in advance inbound, and then on the ground, it's pretty much fly by the moment, because the aircraft coming to us is a lot less structured in that an aircraft can call ready at any time. So if you're doing ground, for example, you may have a plan, and then someone requests pushback, so you've got to amend that plan completely. So our planning in the ground scenario is probably only about 30 seconds to a minute or so.
So it sounds like Michael's jazz, Kim's kind of conducting a symphony by the sounds of things.
Yeah,
that's the way round I thought it would be. I just
wanted to bring this question up, and I didn't want to go over Michael's face here. Actually, if we could take the photo down, it won't obscure him. Finchy says here, you just said there, how accurately can you see we're flying the approach? He might have to go away and rethink things, but how accurate is that, Michael? Can you see if they're off the ILS markedly?
Yeah, so
is it feet or?
It's a safety mechanism, so it monitors the lateral and vertical profile as it flies down the approach, and if it's outside certain parameters, we'll then say to the pilot, are you visual, are you happy, or we'll take some executive control if needs be. But it's just to allow us to ensure that aircraft are all flying the approach correctly, or if they've got distracted and got below the profile. So it's just an additional safety mechanism that it'll sound an alarm, and we can just say, make sure that everything's okay.
Does that happen much?
No.
Okay. And do you ever grade, in particular, Finchy's flying?
We do, but it's a separate grading system I probably can't articulate in a public channel.
So Michael, I just want to go back a little bit to your training. So when you turned up day one of NATS College, do you have sort of any say as to what part of air traffic you go into? How does the kind of training work, dependent on if you're going to tower, or like Kim, if you're going to be an approach controller? Is that decided for you, or do you have some sort of say in it?
It's decided for you. On the whole, there are some circumstances, but generally the business will say, look and see what their training requirement is coming for the next 18 months to 2 years. And from that, they'll then sequence people. So if they need more radar controllers, more will go to radar. If they're really short of tower controllers, more people go to tower. So it's just trying to always balance the business need of, a bit like type ratings, ensuring you have enough people coming through to fill the place that may be going later on.
Right.
Do people ever cross over, or are you sort of fixed?
Not generally. Once you've done it, it doesn't happen all that often. Generally, because it's a bit of a risk, because just because you can do tower controlling, for example, doesn't mean you'll be able to do en route controlling. So it's a bit of a risk to take all it to go through all that retraining in the hope that you make it. So most people generally don't. I think once you get settled down as well, if you're, say, based at Aberdeen, you then run the risk of being sent to Swanwick, because we're a mobile grade. You can be sent where the country requires you. So I think most people kind of settle down once they're happy. However, from an airport point of view, there may be more movement. So you may go to an airport that you want to go to a bigger airport, or an airport that's slightly different. So you'll do a different airport, but still in the same role.
Okay.
So can I ask, and this isn't the question I'm supposed to ask, I'll ask that one in a minute, but this is something that's just come to me. Do you have, between the sort of the area and the tower controllers, is there that kind of angst between the kind of we have between Boeing and Airbus? Is it a bit like that? Do you have that banter between you, or do you just see yourself as one team, or is one the cool gang and the one's not the not so cool gang that doesn't have windows? How does it work?
Me? Or like
Go on.
Okay. Well, any of you?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think it's like you say, it's friendly banter. But all the tower guys that and girls that I interact with, I think are amazing. It's not something that ever interested me. I never wanted to be a tower controller. I always wanted to be in front of a radar. So for me, that's the way that I got streamed, and I was incredibly happy about that. Yeah, I think there's always a little friendly rivalry, the same as the Boeing and the Airbus, but it's never meant. Anything I say is never meant against. I am though massively jealous of the windows. That is a genuine gripe.
Michael, do you have anything to add, or are you going to just say
No,
that's a
I
politic?
completely agree. Friendly banter is always the way forward. I think it's natural in aviation to take the mick out of colleagues, but similarly, you always respect what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. Kimmy, another question that I should have asked. Now I'm going to get into trouble from Lindsay from going over here, but you've got an additional role, which is training,
Yes.
as well as on top of your normal controlling job.
Yeah.
If any of our listeners are considering this as a career, and there won't be many because they don't see it as a career normally, do they? What attributes and skills do you think they would need to get into the job today? Is it hand-eye coordination? Is it playing computer games? What would you say is, your top 5 things you'd need to be a controller?
So I'm going to be one of those people. There's no one thing that makes a good controller. Controllers come from all walks of life. You've got the people who fell into aviation from an early age. You've got me that kind of fell into it a bit later. That I think the main criteria are calm under pressure. You have to be able to make quick decisions, good decisions, and stick with that. But on the flip side, you also have to be able to have a plan A, B, C, D, and onwards. You have to be able to adapt and do it quickly and well. NATS, obviously the air traffic controller program, isn't open at the moment, but you can go to the NATS website and you can register your interest if you do want to come and do the coolest job in the world. Which is also gets
just to be clear, the second coolest job in the world. Just to be clear,
I'm going to mute him. I am going to mute him.
Right now, I've just got.
Because I get to talk to pilots.
Okay.
oh,
Yeah,
actually, that's fair. That's fair. I'll give you that one.
Right now, just before we move on to sort of, a typical day, I've just got one question that, Kim, I'm hoping you can answer for me. So when we speak to you, or when we speak to air traffic, and they go, "Oh yeah, sorry, I was on the phone," and they don't hear us the first time. Like, who are you actually speaking to?
It can be anyone, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't realise helps to do the job that we do. So it might be that someone's trying to coordinate with me to get a pilot shortcut, and that involves coordination. Or it might be that I've also got general aviation and I have to coordinate that with the tower. Or it might be that there's an upcoming aircraft that needs priority. There can be so many things that are on the phone for, not that aren't immediately obvious, but normally I am genuinely on the phone.
So it's not Domino's or like.
It's
No
got
food
something
in the
to
ops
do with
room. No food.
Just taking the edge off it for me. Okay. Right. Before we go on to your typical day at work, I'm just going to show a very quick video. And this was a video that Nat's put together to show the airspace for a day over London, just so that our viewers can sort of gain an appreciation of just how busy it is.
We'll ask detailed questions of both of you after this.
Studying.
quite carried away there with that.
She was
So was
dancing.
I.
Okay.
I just
That is
noticed it
amazing,
kind of
isn't it?
looked at my hair.
I know. I did think it was color coordinated to your approach. Good work.
That's how I did it.
Right. So, Michael, I'm going to start with you on this one. Now, I know that there's probably no such thing as a typical day at work, and that every day is different and varied. But if you could just give us like a really general overview from what happens when you turn up to the staff car park to when you go home at the end of the day.
So get to the staff car park, and normally the barrier doesn't work, so you spend 15 minutes there trying to get into the staff car park. We're quite fortunate. The tower for us is airside, so we get to walk through the terminal, so go through the normal rigors of aviation security that I'm sure we all love. But I kind of quite enjoy being able to walk through the terminal and see passengers and speed
Pilots.
a little bit.
See pilots. As
Pilots,
well. Yeah.
yes, that's always a pleasure. Because for the majority of the day, we're locked away in the tall building and don't actually see anybody. So for that period, it's kind of quite nice to just see that there is a world out there. Get to the tower, then brief. So we'll go in, check the weather, what runway is in use, and then we've got various instructions that we have to read. So we have a manual that tells us basically how to do the job in essence. However, that's continually being updated, or there's a temporary change. So brief ourselves on any of the changes that have gone through. Then the most important thing, go get a cup of tea, and then up to the tower. And there's various roles within the tower. So we've got a delivery controller who's responsible for managing the airfield startups and managing workload generically through the tower. Then the ground people who move the aircraft around, and then the air controllers who are responsible for either landing or departing the aircraft. And we'll just go up and see whichever one is the next one that needs a break, take over, work that position for however long, get a break, go back downstairs, have a cup of tea, repeat that for around about 7 or 8 hours, and then go home.
Okay.
So you can be doing any one of those positions. It's not like I'm coming in to do the landing runway.
No, it's just whatever position needs a break next generally, or there will be some level of plan towards the end, so we make sure everybody obviously doesn't run out of hours because we're only able to work a certain number of hours. But we're all qualified to do all the positions, so you'll often go on a break and have no idea what you're coming back to do.
And when you brief, sorry, I'm ruining the flow of questions, but when you brief, is that you briefing yourself, or
Yeah,
do you
it's
brief
all-
with others?
No, it's all self-briefing.
Okay.
And Kim, what about for you?
Pretty much the same. Apart from I don't get to walk to the terminal. Obviously, I'm based at Swanwick, so still do the self-briefing, have a look. So if we've got, for us, it would be more air displays, changes in procedures, new airline call signs that might have come in that we should be aware of. Head in, grab the headset, wander through, and as you're walking through, you kind of get a feel of what might be happening. So is there weather avoiding? Is it busy? Are there low vis? And then, just head over, find out whether I'm doing Stansted or Luton, and then go and take over the person and let them out.
That's
Cool.
cool.
I'm going to bring this one up, and both of you mentioned breaks. But how long are the breaks? I mean, does it depend on the workload? If it's really busy, do you have more breaks, or is it kind of fixed that you'll do it for 20 minutes, then the next person will come in and take you off your station? How does that work?
For us, it varies unit by unit because the rules depend on the complexity of the traffic. At Heathrow, the maximum we can do in position is 90 minutes. And if we've worked 90 minutes, we need a minimum of 30-minute break. So you'll generally do about an hour and a quarter in position, then a 30-minute break, and then you just keep repeating that through the day.
How about
Kimmy,
you?
is that similar?
Very similar. So we could do maximum 2 hours at times, and certain positions, then it's 90 minutes again. That's during the day, and then a minimum 30-minute break at night. Because it's quieter and the traffic is more sporadic, we can work up to 4 hours. But if we worked that long, then the minimum break becomes 45 minutes, or kind of pro rata for how long you've worked over the 2 hour period.
Okay. So if I'm coming in, then I'm coming to spell you. Do I have to just come in and plug in, or is there like a crossover period that I have to sit there and watch you for a bit? I mean, you often see that on TV. I don't know whether it's true or not. Does the controller taking over stand there for a period to get the feel of it, or do you just, there you are, hospital pass, I'm off for my break?
I'm giving up.
Yeah.
No, we love an acronym as well. So we have, for approach, we have prawns for the handover.
In fact, there we are. As if by magic, it's appeared. Yeah.
Pressure, high, low, min, stack. You've got the runways in use. You've got the airfield, so the ILS if it's working, if there's any degradation, the spacing that's required for the tower, the frequencies. You've then got the weather. Have you got low visibility? Have you got weather avoiding? Have you got strong winds? Non-standard, so if you are holding and you've got EATs, if you've got non-standard flights, if you've got danger areas active, and then you do a strip to display. So we have the electronic strips as well, and you will literally point out the traffic. Big Jet 123, there, flight level 80, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta is there, wants his own transit, waiting outside for a clearance, and then you have to say, kind of, are you happy? They have to say, I'm happy. Then they take over, and then the general rule of thumb is that you hang around to make sure that you haven't forgotten anything, make sure that they've got the entire picture as well. So it's very much 50-50 responsibility for handing it over and taking over, as to whose responsibility is that everybody has the information that they need.
Wow.
That's cool. And Michael, do you bother doing any of that?
Is that the same?
Similar, we don't have a fancy acronym, unfortunately. But yeah, exactly the same. The person plugs in, and then you just work your way through the configuration. So westerly or easterly, which runway is using. So left up, right down, or whichever configuration. Work in progress on the airfield to point out any bits of taxiway that are closed. Then on our electronic flight strip, we have an information bar where you can put ancillary information. So it might be a frequencies not available. So you run through anything there. And then exactly the same, you run through the traffic and just go through each strip for each particular aircraft or vehicle and say where they are and what they're doing. And once the person next to you is happy, they'll say, yep, I'm happy. And they'll take over. Then exactly the same. You linger around for a couple of minutes just to make sure that you haven't forgotten something and that they have got it. Yeah, so it's a fairly seamless thing. You kind of do it 5-6 times a shift. So.
I'm going to loop back very briefly to location. So obviously, Michael, you've got a lovely tower, a beautiful tower, although it does look slightly unfinished, the one at Heathrow, but it's certainly more beautiful than the one that preceded it. And Kim, you're in Swanwick, out in the wilds of Hampshire, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are there any sort of radar controllers that are still in the base of the tower, like days gone by, or am I just living in the past there?
No, Southampton still have their approach in their tower. Yeah. And I think a few others do as well. Yeah.
Because we obviously had an episode with Cranfield, and they talked about the virtual tower. I can't remember exactly what it's called now, actually, but the new technology tower stuff that's sort of remote, and it all just sounded amazing. But it was very obvious that you could sort of almost control from anywhere these days. It's really quite fascinating.
I'm sure people may or may not know. In fact, I, with Michael, visited the virtual tower that Heathrow has. Heathrow has a virtual tower under its actual tower. So when they want to virtually control it, they just go downstairs and lose the windows and end up like Kimmy. It is actually quite cool, though, and that one involves some very clever AI. We might actually do a little show about that one because it is. And a minute, they call it the lab. Is that correct? The tower lab?
So it's a testing. It's called the lab, as it's under testing at the moment. But it's using camera technology to be able to provide a visual control room. So yeah, using an array of 4K cameras mounted on the tower, and then obviously superimposing AI technology over it. But yeah, it's a lab at the moment as they test it all and see how it works.
It's pretty cool.
Kim, so obviously you're looking at a 2D screen. How do we get to a 3D picture in your brain? How does that work?
I don't really get a 3D picture. I don't know how people do. To me, it's very much uppy, downy, lefty, righty in its really simplest form.
If you could make it sound slightly more technical than that, please, that would be great.
It is. So if I've got Big Jet 123 at flight level 90, and they need to get to 4,000 feet, But over here, in the way, we've got small jet 456 at flight level 80. It's how do I get this person, this flight crew to where they want to be, and this flight crew to where they want to be. So I can't do that. They're in the way. Can I turn them? Can I use headings? Or do I have to descend the small jet and then descend the big jet on top? So it's very much, you're looking for gaps that you can point aircraft to. You're looking for the levels. Is 9 free? Is 10 free? Okay, do I have to climb, descend them to get everything? Because Stansted, especially for Essex, they come from the west and they come from the east. And more often than not, everything for Luton comes from the east and has to go this way. And then everything for Stansted wants to get right through it. So it's very much using headings and levels, and just making those plans in your head, finding the gaps and just making it work.
Yeah. So and so it sounds like playing a game with a very specific set of rules. So rather than transforming it into a 3D picture in your mind, you're applying those rules in with a sort of ninja type skill.
Yeah,
and
it's 1,000 feet vertically or 3 miles laterally, and that's what you're constantly playing with. And you're doing that using vectors and headings, turning them and descending them. And so that's why I always come down to, when anyone asks what I do, fundamentally, up, down, left, right. And if I can't do the up, down, can I do left, right, and then go up or down? And normally it works.
Okay.
But that's bizarre, because I always thought that you thought in some sort of 3D model in your head. I always, that's the way I always thought it. Maybe we should give it a go. I think maybe we should go and give it a go and see if we can do it.
Is there like a bouncy castle version? Then we can have a go. But I'm not sure. Live bullets is where I want to go. But Michael, your ninja skill is runway use. How do you do that? I mean, particularly recently with mixed, where we've basically not been alternating using a single runway. So for everyone who's listening, Heathrow usually lands on one, takes off on the other. But I was super impressed, even though it was relatively quiet, the sequencing of the runway at Heathrow. How do you do it?
We tend not to use up and down on the ground. It doesn't quite work out for us, unfortunately. So in terms of departures, in a normal day, if we were just using one runway for departure, it's called sequencing. So if an aircraft takes off and turns left, and then the next one takes off, turns right, we can do that as soon as the first one's airborne. If they follow the same way, there's got to be a wait between the two aircraft to ensure that there's separation or spacing once they're in the sky. So the main role we're trying to do is get one to go left, one to go right, one to go left, one to go right, and you can get as many airborne as you can then within the hour. The only slight issue with that is then you have wake turbulence spacing. So obviously if a big aircraft goes first, the little aircraft's got to wait a little bit of time for the wake turbulence to disappear before it can go. So you can get creative in that if the big one goes left and the little one goes left, you've got to wait a little bit because they're on the same route, but you also had to wait a little bit because you've got a big one and a small one. So you've kind of taken two restrictions and just put them into one, saving yourself a little bit of time. Then you have other things. So there might be a slot. So obviously some aircraft, for capacity reasons, have a time that they've got to take off. So when you're sequencing, you have to ensure that they're going to be able to take off in that time. And then there are all the various restrictions that different routes have different spacing requirements. So it's just a big game of mental time maths, really.
Well, okay. Yeah. And I'd just like to know, when I'm taxiing out and I say we can take intersections something, if it helps, right, which is what we always say. I mean,
does it ever help?
If it helps me, does it ever help you?
It only ever helps me if it would have helped in the first place. Because if it would have helped me, I'd have probably have offered you it at that point. It can be useful sometimes as a little heads up. Infrequently, it's not often that it is all that useful.
Thanks for the feedback.
No, that's good feedback, because we plan for one and you go, we'll definitely have that one, and we'll offer it to them. Of course they'll give us it, and rarely you do, and we'll go, no, I didn't do that.
Yeah, if it helps, brackets me. So here's a question, right? So we'll come on to simulators in a bit, but we practice in simulators. Does the same thing exist for air traffic control? And what does it look like? What do you do with it? If we start with Kim, I think that'd probably be the way to go.
Yeah, we have simulators and they look identical to the ones that we use every day. They're at a different location and we use them for training of the ab initio trainees, and we also use them for our refresher training every year. But they are pretty much an exact mock-up of what we'd use in the ops room.
And what's on the other? So what are you talking? You're talking to what, machinery or people or?
Yeah, so we have pseudo pilots. So they are assistants who can input what we tell them to create a really realistic way, and it looks pretty much exactly the same as it would, but it's only one voice that you hear. So it's one person or two people doing all of the input.
Do people put voices on?
Some of them do.
Nigel voices.
Yeah, some of them will, and especially
Really?
for emergencies. Yeah, although if we're doing emergency training, they might try and mimic the emergency a little bit. It helps. It's really good.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
And Michael, what about for the tower? Do you have a tower simulator or a ground simulator? And is it the same as Kim? It's like a kind of replica of what you've got when you sit at work?
Yeah, we're really fortunate. We have a 360-degree simulator. So it's a mock-up of the tower. And then around the outside, there's 360 degrees of screens. And then they project a computer image of the airport and the aircraft onto it. So it's a pretty realistic rendition.
And how often do you guys train in the simulators? Is it, because we go in every 6 months. What's the frequency for you?
For emergency training, so we have to do once every year. We have to do refresher training, and so for the first 3 years after you validate, then you have to be in the simulator. And after that, you can either do in the simulator or more like a tabletop or a classroom exercise. So you'll discuss a lot of the things, and that's when we would often try and bring in pilots as well for their input, which is really, really beneficial to us.
Okay.
And so, and it might be worth sort of touching on the initial part of your training, but obviously, so you plan so you train for normal, but you also train for kind of abnormal. At what point in the course does that get introduced? How do you build those skills? What do you end up experiencing out on, and how frequently out on the line, or whatever you call it in the controller world? Kim.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not used to this. Two people thing. Oh.
So the first emergency training that I did was after I got my rating. So not through the basic or any of the other courses. It was once you had a rating and a license, and then you'll do it again before you validate. So before you are allowed to go solo on your own, and then from then it's every year before the renewal of your license, you'll do at least one emergencies training, and it will often feature hot topics as well. But we do it because aviation is so safe. Emergencies they happen, the non-normals happen, but you want to train for the things that you hope you never ever see, so that your skills are sharp, so that you know what to do, so that you're not startled or you just fall back on your training. And a lot of it, when it's busy, when there's weather, you fall back on your training because the training is so rigorous and so intense that it just becomes almost like breathing. You just do it.
And Kim, do you find that as an approach controller, are there kind of non-normals that are quite common? Are there kind of events or instances where you think actually that's quite a common thing that I see, day to day or week to week? And if so, what would that be?
At the moment, weather is quite a big thing. We've had quite a few bad weather days. And when that happens, you tend to resort a lot more to levels. So you're not using the headings as much because you can't plan for it. At that point, it becomes a little bit more reactive. Whereas we like to plan obviously 30, 50, 75 miles away. So then you use levels. And then you will also get, especially on the lower level, infringements quite common.
Okay.
Not massively common, but it does happen. I've had aircraft call up and they've got comms issues and they just want a radio check, or they're doing an air test and they just want someone to look out for them. Sometimes they just want somebody to know that they're there.
So with the infringement, because it is quite a hot topic at the minute, and especially as people are getting back into flying and sort of getting back into practice. So an infringement being, for those listeners who aren't sure, maybe a light aircraft maybe just clips the edge of your zone or comes into your zone without permission.
Yeah.
And what does that do to your workload, and how do you manage that?
It increases the workload. We have to keep a certain distance, a big distance between the infringing aircraft and any of our regular IFR inbound, so anything that might be on final approach, because you don't know what it's going to do. It's unknown. And so there's the coordination. You might have to stop departures depending on where they've infringed. You might have to send your aircraft around if you think they're going to get in close proximity. You might have to issue avoiding action. You're obviously then putting out blind calls in the hope that they might be listening, or it might be that they've completely lost comms, but they can hear you. So then you're asking, if you can hear me, Scorpio, then it's just upping that workload, and that is reducing your capacity to handle as many aircraft. So then you have to take steps. So then it's, do I need an extra person sat next to me? Do I need someone to man the phones? Do I need to stop departures? Do I need to stop inbounds? What steps do I need to take to make sure that I can keep everything that I'm responsible for safe and keep the infringer safe? Because if they don't know where they're going and they don't know that they're flying towards a busy international airport, there is a risk of collision. I've never had anything like that, thankfully, but it is still a risk, and it's always in the back of your head. I have to keep everyone safe. I need to try and keep this as safe as I possibly can.
Sure. And oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, Michael, similar sort of question for you, but you get the window to look at the whatever's going on, presumably, and that could be anything from, I don't know, a tug fire to something far more dramatic. And presumably you get command and control over some of the other services like fire brigades and things like that.
So,
how does it work in your area?
Yeah, we're always looking out for if there's anything happening on the airfield. I'd say the majority of the incidents we deal with are really, really minor. They're normally things that are through an abundance of caution, that say a hydraulics issue on an aircraft that's got 4 hydraulic systems, but we put all the measures in place just in case. So I think that's often the case, that people see, 7700 squawks or emergency squawks, and actually it's just through an abundance of caution, or medical emergencies. So there's someone on board who's not very well, so we'll do everything we can to obviously get them on the ground as quick as possible. But yeah, we at an airport, we have a thing called the emergency orders, which is a book that has various different categories of emergency, and in that it lists everybody's role and responsibility. So from air traffic, we'll generally have the alerting action, so we'll get to press the crash button that sends an alarm out, and on that we can inform everybody. It's a really clever button. Not only does it sound an alarm, I get really excited about this button, that it also opens the fire station doors automatically and turns off their cookers. So obviously if they run to the fire engine, so they can get straight out without having to worry about it.
It does not. It does not.
It doesn't turn the cookers off. You've made that up.
It turns the cookers off.
Promise. Say honest.
Absolutely promise.
Really?
Yeah.
What? So they don't have to worry about like the bacon catching fire and then having
exactly.
to rush
If
back
they all run out and get in their fire engine, it's a bit embarrassing to come back to the fire station on fire. So yeah, it disconnects them all.
I tell you what, that is a button to have a malfunction with about 8:30 every morning.
Exactly. Yeah, if you want to annoy the fire station. But yeah, so we'll do that. And in most emergencies, that's kind of the end of our role from a tower point of view, that we let everybody know it's happening, and then we really move on to managing the traffic at that point, whether it's having to send things around, vector stuff to different places, coordinating diversions and the like. But every agency has it, from the fire service, the police, the ambulance service, right down to the reverend, so what he needs to do, local hospitals. It's a really comprehensive guide as to what everybody needs to do.
Wow, the reverend. Goodness me. Yeah, okay,
that does surprise me. So this book then, Michael, is that, as being pilots, we like a flight reference card. Is it a checklist like that, or is it, do you say, right, we've got a fire on the airfield, open the big book, steps 1 to 20 is for fire? Is it a bit like that, or is it different?
It's very similar to kind of the alert things. You have some memory items in that as soon as you see it, you press the button, you give a little bit of information so the fire service can get out towards the incident and people on the airfield know what's happening. And then, they'll go into a folder that lists then all the next actions and steps they need to take. But it is fairly vague because obviously it depends on the situation. It's really hard to write a scenario for every single emergency. So it's very much, this is kind of the ideas you need to be thinking about, but it's left to the controllers in position to decide what's best.
Oh.
Okay.
Sounds really difficult because I quite like a checklist because it's black and white. When we start talking about ambiguity and greyness, that's where I don't do so well.
And it's interesting, isn't it, Scott? Because for us, we put the jet in a position which is now stabilized, and then we do that ambiguous decision-making thing afterwards. So I guess it's very analogous to that. I was going to move on to weather, actually, Scotty.
Yeah. Why does bad weather cause you so many problems? It causes such a headache, and Kimmy's mentioned it, Michael's mentioned it as well. What are the challenges of bad weather?
Start with Kim.
Yeah.
You can't plan anymore. You can only plan so far. And we like a plan. So like I've said, you get increase in workloads. You've got more communication with other controllers, with the tower, with the flight crew. So they might come in and say they're on a weather avoiding heading, and then you're trying to find out how long will that heading be needed. Will that heading take you outside of controlled airspace? Okay, I now have to tell you that you're going to go outside of controlled airspace and what service you'll be under, and then can I see traffic? And then I have to think, okay, can I bring someone else into that gap? And we had it recently, and the headings were changing all the time. And what was a heading for 20 miles suddenly became, actually, we need to turn left and we need to head south. Okay, then I have to make another plan. So it's just that constant re-updating and rechecking, and aircraft suddenly aren't in a position that you would normally expect them to be. So you've got the increased workload from double checking everything. You're double checking, triple checking. You're making sure that everybody's at the right level, at a safe level, on a safe heading. It disrupts.
And Kim, sometimes when we're kind of turning base or we're downwind, the approach controller said, "Can you give me a wind readout?" Why is that?
Yes.
Why do you want to know that specifically? Why does that help you? Or
it might be because the wind. So we have a wind readout on one of our screens, but it is for the ground, so it might not necessarily reflect what's happening in the air. And if we're using the headings and we're using speeds, but they might not be working, and we can't. It's not necessarily reflecting what we're seeing on the screen. A wind readout can help us predict, well, actually, if you've got 170 knots of a tailwind on base leg, I need to make sure I'm building that into my sequence, and therefore I might not take you on a shortcut. I might make sure everything's going standard arrival. I might bring the speed back quicker. That might affect the spacing or final approach, because if I'm providing 5 mile spacing, it might be that I'm having to establish the aircraft behind 7 miles to allow for the catch up, so that it gets to 5 by the time the tower have it, so that I don't end up with the aircraft sent around and back to me again and having to feed it into the sequence. So it's all just constant situational awareness, constant management of what's going on and all the information that's provided to you, including what you can get from the flight crew.
Okay. There's a really good question actually from one of our listeners. This is for Michael. So does thick fog make the ground, particularly controlling, harder or easier, given you'll presumably be reliant on screens rather than having visual reference? So maybe talk to us a little bit about low visibility ops and how you deal with that when you actually can't see the aircraft from the tower down on the runway.
It does make it a lot harder. You can't see anything. It's really, radar is great, but it's only ever history, and it doesn't give you all the tips and tricks that you can get looking out the window, that I can see, oh, he's moving quick, he's moving a little bit slower. I can make that work. He'll be ahead of him. I don't need to worry about that. I can glance out the window and go, has he started his pushback? Yes or no. Whereas if you wait on the radar, it's really hard to kind of work out what's happening, because all you've got is an instant position of everything. And LVPs as well, we've got to protect the runway to a greater distance for the ILS, the instrument landing system. So there's greater spacing on the approach as well. And there's associated rules with that. So fog is really, really difficult. And it's really surreal. It's going to sound really strange to Kim, but to sit there all day and not see a single aircraft, it feels like you've not done anything. It's a really strange feeling. You get home and it's like,
Careful.
Did this actually happen? All I've seen is all this stuff occur on radar. None of those aircraft could have been real. This could have just been a whole simulation, and I have no idea. So it is pretty strange. And it's harder for the pilots as well. Everybody moves a lot slower. The ground ops vehicles can't move around as freely, so there's a lot more vehicular movements that we have to control. So it just is a bit of a faff, really.
So the end result is everything is slower and your flight gets delayed. Isn't it? I mean, to the uninitiated, why am I waiting in this airport?
And the main reason is that we can put the aircraft about 2 miles apart down the approach. When it's really foggy, you're really talking no closer than about 5.5, 6 miles. So if you think for every set of landings, you've lost one, you've knocked yourself down to about 50% of your capacity straight off. And it's the same with departures, that normally, if we're cleaning stuff for takeoff, if we can see them out of the window, we can let them take off closer together. If you can't, they've got to be further apart. So it just slows everything down, and our capacity is normally cut by at least 50%, if not more.
And do you ever end up in the cloud when actually the airfield isn't like this?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really shrill one. Although slightly more concerning is when the rest of the airfield's in fog and you're not, and you just see the tops of the tails seen along. It's just like shark fins in the water. So all these people, it's like 50 meters in fog, and you see the aircraft coming into land, and it just disappears into the fog, and all you see is the top of its tail going along.
That's cool.
So you work in the famous tower, Mike. It has, how high are you when you're up there on the second floor at the top?
280 odd feet, I think it is.
Yeah, and it's a pretty thin stalk that you're sitting on. Do you get sick when it moves? Does it move?
Does it move?
It sways when it's windy enough, yes.
Do you feel? Does it make you nauseous, or how much does it move?
Some do have a slight issue with it, and will do less time if possible upstairs while it is. But it's not really marked swaying. It's just it's a bit like being on a boat in kind of slightly choppy water. It's kind of a gentle swaying versus a rocking.
Scott's unable to be on a boat, so he'd be terrible. You'd have to go radar, Scott.
Not a chance. Not a chance. I'm gonna.
It's during a night shift. You really don't want it, 'cause it's just that gentle swaying at like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just like, oh, this is quite nice actually.
And good night. Yeah. Oh, couldn't do the boat thing.
Right, just kind of one final bit from me. We've obviously had our COVID pandemic where air travel and flying has just ground to a halt, and we're now slowly beginning to recover and seeing an increase of aircraft in the sky. So just before we kind of move on to post-pandemic and pre-pandemic numbers, I'm going to show you this video which compares April 2019 and April 2020. Wow, that is, such a stark contrast from just 1 year apart. So as we start to, build up and increase the frequency of flights, Kim, I'll start with you. Kind of what measures are you guys taking to get yourself geared up, ready for the numbers that we saw from sort of 18 months ago?
We've already been preparing for a good few months now. We've been doing regeneration sims. So going back into the simulators, controlling heavier traffic in preparation. We're also having constant briefings about being aware that the triggers are going to have changed. So the normal triggers that we would have had before for splitting a sector, for getting someone back, are gone. They're different, they're lower. Not only that, we're having a lot of conversations amongst ourselves about checking that everyone's okay, checking how they're feeling with the increasing traffic, being aware that people's levels of comfort are going to be different now than they were 2019. So it's even little things of loitering behind because it looks a bit busy and you might have called someone back, so you're just going to be there just in case. And it's very much a case of there are no egos at the moment. No one is chasing traffic. No one is trying to prove anything. We're all aware of what a weird situation this is at the moment, and we're all just, the teamwork is there. We're looking out for each other constantly.
Good. And Michael, what about for the Heathrow team?
Exactly the same, yeah. Regeneration sims with busy traffic levels, and then just that mentality of opening extra positions if we need to be earlier, and just being acutely aware that everyone has skill fade. There's nothing you can do about it. And what you may think that you could have done 12, 18 months ago isn't necessarily the case now, just to take it steady and build up with the traffic.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it, that we're all suffering the same problems and largely all solving them in the same way? Must be a good way to do it. I hope you don't mind. I've got one last question, which Pete's given us here. And this really applies to both of you. We have had a problem with drones at the airfields before, without giving away any of the sneaky equipment that we have now, because I know we have some at some locations. Are we still seeing drones causing a problem? Is it getting worse? And how can we educate people, do you think, about the dangers of drones and planes coming together? Michael.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can't say anything really in terms of procedures or anything that we have against it now. I think drones are still reported, and therefore there is still an issue. I think it's hard with drones because they kind of fall into two camps. One is someone doing it on purpose because they want to get a really good video of something to land, which is very different to a bloke that's just gone, or a lady who's just gone and bought the drone and doesn't really think about airspace. They just want to fly their drone. So there's two very distinct camps. I think NATS are doing all they can to kind of educate, and they're working with a lot of the drone manufacturers to ensure that information is provided within all the drones they sell. There's information available on the internet. There was the instigation of the FRZs, or the flight restricted zones for drones, so it kind of made it a bit more obvious for people wanting where they can't fly it. And legislation is also catching up slowly but surely to kind of make it so things are a little bit more enforceable to help in the matters. I think we are probably in a much better place than we were a few years ago. I think it brought it to the fore, but work just continues with it.
Kimmy, does it affect the radar side at all, or is it more just around the airport in particular?
I've had drones reported at 4,000 feet in my airspace, 50 feet off to the side of an aircraft. So it can still affect us, and for us, obviously, we can't see it. We're going purely in reports, and then we have to warn everything for the next half an hour of the last time that it was seen, what it looked like, and then we have to accept the fact that crews might not want to fly that. They might want to adjust what they do. Again, it increases our workload and it reduces our capacity, and we can't see them. They don't show up on radar. So we have no way of forewarning other than so-and-so reported it 20 minutes ago. It could be there, it might not. So.
Wow. Okay, right. Well, I'm conscious that we're slightly running over on time. So we've got one final set of questions, and these are questions that we ask of all of our guests. So I think I'm going to start my question first. I'm going to start with Michael, and it would be if you could give advice to your 10-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what would that be?
Don't bother with the piloting light. Just get straight into air traffic.
Good. Okay.
Strong.
More serious answer. That's the thing is, I'd probably go for it much earlier. My biggest regret is never getting to control Concorde. So I think that's kind of the thing that's always in my mind, that I kind of waited and and went, well, could I do it? Is it for me? I'm not necessarily sure I'll get the grade. Actually, just go for it, because you just never know what will happen.
Okay. Thank you, Kim.
That you can put anything you put your mind to, that failure is not the end, and then you can still be a grown-up woman and love unicorns and sparkles.
Perfect.
Or man.
Or a man. I mean, we've still got to hear what Michael's spirit animal is.
Yes.
Go on, Scott.
So mine's slightly different, and it goes back to what's the thing that you're most proud of thus far, Kimmy? And that could be professional, it could be personal. What's the thing you're most proud of?
Getting the air traffic control job. Sounds sappy, but I remember the day that I phoned my dad and told him that I'd been accepted into NATS, and it's one of the only times in my life that I've known my dad cry, because he was so happy and he was so proud.
Wow. Wow. Mike.
Similar cliche, but yeah, validating at Heathrow. I dread to think the number of hours I'd spent stood at the fence at Heathrow, looking in and listening in and thinking, oh, it'd be amazing to do that one day. And I still find it quite surreal sometimes that I'll ring up and go, oh, can I come upstairs and just do an hour if I've been working in the office that day? And they're like, yeah, come up. And it's really strange now that I can basically ring it and say, I want to go do something that I just longed to do for so long.
That is nice.
That is cool.
Wow, that is cool. I was hoping Michael would actually say it's having my own 747 simulator that I can go in every single day. Now, Michael does have that in his house, well, in a friend's house, but it is amazing. If anyone, it's better than the one that where we work has. It is stunning. I was hoping that would be your answer and we could have pictures of that, but obviously not.
No, my backup answer was obviously getting flown home from Los Angeles by Scott was a very close second.
Strong answer.
Obviously.
Strong answer.
Strong
Michael.
answer. You're a winner. You can come back.
Right, Mike, what's yours?
My question, the final question, is very, very simple, which is, Michael, what does the next 5 years hold for you?
Same, nothing really changing. I'm really happy where it is. It's a thrilling job. Every day is different. Every day has a new challenge. Every day is full of satisfaction with what you've done. So I see no reason to change at all. It's just carry on down the same line.
Kim?
Returning to travel, hopefully. We've got a honeymoon plan for next year.
Nice.
And then, yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. And then just training the future air traffic controllers is what I'm looking forward to doing most. Just passing on what I've learned, seeing them grow, seeing them accomplish their goals and their dreams, hopefully. That'd be good.
Yeah. And obviously, well, I mean, thank you very much. And we're going to pop you in the green room and then have a chat afterwards. But from my perspective, you know, I've flown like Scott, like Lindsay, flown all over the world. And we get the opportunity to secret shop air traffic controllers. And the thing that stands out for me about the controllers around the UK is that it feels like you're part of our crew. And that's not, you don't always get that feeling from other areas of the world.
Yeah.
And that's a special skill because it obviously talks to the kind of depth and quality of training and the type of person that's selected. So on behalf of all of pilots, I'll just like big that up. You know?
Yeah.
I'm speaking on behalf of all pilots in the UK. Thank you.
Brilliant. And thank you very much for your time tonight as well. It's been a pleasure to talk to you both.
Thank you.
Thank
It's been
you.
great.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Wow.
They're cool, aren't they?
Such a good insight and such a cool job.
But it turns the fireman's bacon off.
That is awesome. That is the coolest thing I've learned tonight. The other coolest thing is that I honestly, and this is, I don't know where I've got this from, I always had an impression that they had to take that 2D picture and kind of in their head do some ninja stuff and make it into sort of a 3D model. And the way Kimmy explained it just blew my mind because they obviously don't, or Kimmy doesn't. Maybe others do, but it's just weird.
Yeah,
weird.
But wouldn't that be nice to have an instructor that just demystifies it like that for you?
It would be amazing.
That's wonderful. That's really cool.
Well, next week I'm not here. I'm in Scotland catching up with some of my family. So we'll decide if I can trust you two guys to run it on your own or not.
We're going to do something.
We're going to do something really cool when you're not here.
All right, then.
It's going to be a surprise.
God. All right, then. Well, I guess
Don't forget, if you're watching in the future, subscribe.
Yes.
And likes always work for us. So comments and likes, please, so that lovely YouTube algorithm pushes the stories that we spend our time, well, Lindsay spends our time writing all the questions for.
We'll hope for the best for next week then.
Good.
And in the meantime, have a good week, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.